start with the Pledge of Allegiance and ask Ms. Nanette Rivera to lead the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. A couple of housekeeping items that we have, since we have a hybrid meeting today with the public invited to join us by both in person and in Zoom. We really appreciate those who are here today and those that are joining this meeting. In addition to the physical meeting, our proceedings are being live streamed via Zoom and also Collier TV and the district website. Board members, I'd like to ask you when speaking, if you would please use the buttons on the dais and also make sure your microphone is on and that you're speaking directly into the microphone so everyone can hear you. For those of you who are here in person, if you would like to comment on any item on our agenda as we move through the meeting, complete a speaker card and present it to Erin Connor, and she'll make sure that when that item comes up that she'll call on you. If you're joining by Zoom and would like to comment, you can use the raise the hand feature. And if you're having any trouble whatsoever, please go to our website, sfwmd.gov, and click the Ask Us button on the top of the page and we will assist you. If you're using a phone and would like to comment, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute your phone. Hopefully, we're all very familiar with these procedures by now, but for some of our new folks, a refresher is helpful, I hope. All right, the next item is the agenda revisions. Ms. Keeler, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, ma'am, there is not.
Okay, great. We'll move on to abstentions by board members from items on the agenda. I'll call on the board members and you just simply say whether or not you have to abstain or reveal any disclosures. Vice Chair Waters.
No abstentions for me, ma'am.
I have no abstentions. Mr. Hill?
No abstentions.
Ms. Rivera?
No abstentions from me.
Okay, there are no abstentions or disclosures today. Approval of the minutes of the July 9th, 2021 Big Cypress Basin Board meeting. If there are no changes or additions, I would like to ask for a motion for approval of the minutes.
I so move the motion.
Mr. Hill moves for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second, ma'am.
Vice Chair Waters seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The vote passes 4-0. Minutes are approved. Okay, this is our first section for general public comment. And there are two opportunities during this meeting for the public to participate. We'll start with anyone who is here in person who has filled out a speaker card, and then we'll follow that up with those joining us remotely. Erin, are there any speaker cards that you have for this section of the agenda?
Madam Chair, I have no public comment in the room or online.
Okay, great. No public comment. We'll move on to our first discussion items. And this is really exciting today, board members, for us to have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers project manager, Mr. Basin, here to present to us. And we also have Lieutenant Colonel Todd Polk. Thank you both for being here. They both traveled to be with us. And they're here from the Army Corps of Engineers, and they're going to update us on the Picayune Strand restoration project. So it's all yours.
Thank you, Colonel Roman, and thank you, board members. It's fantastic to be back here, and I know it's been over a year and change. It's
I think 2 years, almost
really was.
exactly.
Before Dorian, before when I was transitioning with then Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer. So it's fantastic to be back. So first of all, I just think overall, though, we've had great success generally on the 55,000 acres of Picayune Strand. I'd say we're seeing about a 50%, about half that project site is already receiving benefits that we can measure, which is fantastic. Steve Basin is going to get into a pretty great update here in just a few minutes, so I won't steal much of his thunder. But I would say a couple of big points. We're always looking for ways to conduct items concurrently. I think as we continue the Southwest protection feature, as we get about the 2/3 of the way completed from south to north, we'll begin to go, we can go ahead and start plugging the Picayune Canal and then concurrently look at the Miller Canal as well. So we can begin that is the big one I would like just to say. And we're still looking around at 2025 completion. So for the big picture items, and like I said, Steve will get into a lot more detail here in just a second. And then next one I want to hit that's also very close here is for the work for the Western Everglades Restoration Plan or project, excuse me. And that's I know it's been some time. We just recently at our level in Jacksonville, in conjunction with our division in Atlanta, sent back an updated cost and schedule to to General Graham's office to be transmitted over to the ASA's office. So it is continuing on, but we will get that exemption 3x3 exemption completed. But I would also always say is anytime our non-federal sponsor continues to send letters to folks like General Graham's office or to the ASA's office, those are always helpful things. That way, know we're heard, know you're heard, and it helps push this forward, hopefully as fast as possible, because we know it's been some time on work. But
Colonel Polk, for those that may not be familiar with the acronym ASA, could you please tell us what that
Assistant
is?
Secretary of the Army is Mr. Jamie Pinkham, was just recently appointed and sworn in. So he's the one who ultimately will approve that 3x3 extension for that project. So it's one that's we're really trying to push hard on as well and get restarted back into gear to affect us over here on this side.
Right.
So with that though, I'll introduce Steve and he'll give us the full update on Picayune Strand.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Colonel Polk, and good afternoon, everybody. Steve Basin. I'm with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here and to give you an update on the Picayune Strand Restoration Project. As you know, it's in the southwest portion of the state of Florida, between I-75 and US 41, just east of Naples. It is a 55,000 acre site forest. It's a forest now that we are doing a true hydrologic restoration for that forest. We'll, of course, all the canals that we dug and the roads we've constructed kind of altered the flow regime out there. So, and with the canals, they're doing a great job as designed. They drain the site and they drain all of that fresh water down to a single point down there at the Picayune Canal down there near the Port of Islands. So that's one of the issues was we were bringing a lot of fresh water down to the estuaries down there. So by plugging the canals and removing the roads, we're going to restore the flow regime across the site, reduce that point source discharge. And as part of that, we've got 3 pump stations, the Merritt Pump Station, the Picayune Pump Station, and the Miller Pump Station that have been constructed. We have plugged, we're going to be plugging 48 miles. Overall, we'll be plugging 48 miles of canals and removing 260 miles of roads. There's also a manatee refugia area down there on the southern end of the Picayune Canal that provides warm water during the winter time for the manatees to live and survive. We've also got the Southwest Protection Feature, which includes a levee and some culverts, or we've also referred to them as conveyance features that we're putting in on US 41 and County Road 92. The overall project benefits, again, we're going to reduce that point source discharge. We'll restore some of the water supply by recharging the aquifers. And by recharging the groundwater, we'll reduce some of the severity and the frequency of the fires that occur out there, the wildfires that occur out there. It'll help manage the invasive species. And it also, by plugging those canals, we've had an influence of up to 2 to 3 miles away, which was impacting the Fakahatchee Preserve, which was right next door to the east of Picayune Strand. And since we've plugged the Merritt and the Prairie Canals, we have noticed an improvement in the Fakahatchee Preserve already. So, so this SERP, which is the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, was authorized in 2000. Picayune Strand is a part of that Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, and the construction for Picayune was authorized in 2007. We have completed the construction of the 3 pump stations, the Merritt, Picayune, and Miller. We've also plugged the Miller Canal, no, I'm sorry, the Merritt Canal, excuse me, the Merritt Canal and the Prairie Canal. And we've also completed were termed as the stair steps, which is again on the eastern portion of the site, and the upper 3 miles of the Picayune Canal. So we've come quite a long ways. Ms. Roman shared a beautiful video with us when she turned the pumps on after we plugged the Picayune canals, and that was a very heartwarming video, and it just made you kind of being proud of being part of this project, to see the water start flowing over the weirs and restoring the hydrology out there. So, so what's left? So we do have 3 construction projects that are currently underway. We have the Miller Tram and Road removal. That's removing all of the roads that are west of Miller Canal. We've got a design build contract for the culverts or conveyance features that are going to go along US 40 or underneath US 41 and County Road 92. Those are needed to convey that additional water south of those roads so that we don't impact those roads. And then the levee construction, which is the Southwest Protection Feature levee, which will be constructed to protect the agricultural area that's just west of Picayune Strand. So all of those are underway. We anticipate the culverts being completed in July of 23, the levee being completed in October of 23. And then that would leave the remaining portion of the Picayune Canal, which is approximately 6 miles, 5 to 6 miles, and all of Miller Canal. So some of the things that we are doing are looking at the timing and the sequencing of the completion of those canals. Originally, it's been thought that we needed to have the levee completely constructed before we could begin plugging Picayune Canal. Thanks to some of your support and your questions, we were able to plug the upper third of it. Completed that earlier this month. And we've conducted an analysis. It looks like now as Colonel Polk alluded to, if we construct approximately 2/3 of the levee from south to north, we could start plugging the remaining of the Picayune Canal. So as I stated, that we would be done with the levee in summer of 23, so another 2 years from now. So it looks like we can begin plugging the remaining of the Picayune Canal before that. The other things that we're doing in order to be ready, to be in position to begin that plugging is to clear the spoils that are adjacent to the canal. So when they excavated the canal, they took that material and placed it on the side, and that's what we refer to as spoils. And over time, lots of trees and vegetation has grown through those spoils. So we need to clear that off so that we can use that spoil to plug the canal. So we're going to be doing that starting in January. Begin clearing the southern portion of the Picayune Canal, and then moving on to Miller. Probably not next year, but then the following year. So, but again, the idea will be to have it all cleared so that once we have appropriate amount of levee constructed, that we can move forward and begin plugging the canal. And that's the Picayune Canal. We're still doing some modeling to try to assess the timing of the Miller Canal. At worst, if we have to wait until the levee is completed, so that would be late 23, early 24, before we can begin plugging the Miller Canal. And then once we got the Miller Canal plugged, then that will allow us to operate the Miller pump station, and that are all 3 pump stations. And then we will see restoration on the entire site. So as Colonel Polk said, that we're kind of looking at 2025 right now. However, I guess, like I said, we do have some analyses that we're running through that may move it up to, sooner than 25. Okay. So this is just kind of a map showing what's out there. So you can see the roads here on the west side, the yellow roads. That's what is the Miller Tram and Road Removal Project. The dashed red line over here is the levee, the Southwest Protection Feature levee. It's about 7 miles that we're constructing, and this is some agricultural farms right over here. And then to the south, you can see US 41 and County Road 92, where we will be placing those culverts in there. And as I was referring to, the stair steps is over here on the eastern portion. It actually looks like a series of stairs. And that was completed this year, as well as the upper three miles of the Picayune Canal. And this is just kind of an aerial showing some of the construction from the Southwest Protection Feature. This will be the levee footprint, and this is the southernmost portion. And this is the staging area that we have here now. And this is the access from Tomato Road, which Lippman Farms was graciously kind enough to enter into an easement to allow us access through Tomato Road. So we did not have to construct a different access off of US 41 and through the Collier Seminole State Park. So we were able to protect some nice wetlands and cypress stands down there without having to build an access over there. So one of the other things that we're doing is a little wet down there now, where they've had a lot of rain just right there in that area. So the contractor has been approved to access the site from the north. That will also help expedite things. And we're doing some wildlife surveys. So once we get the wildlife surveys completed on that, then they can begin accessing the site from the north and clearing a little staging area there and working to the south. So that will certainly help during the wet season, I guess, to continue their operations out there and meet the schedule. So here's a map showing kind of what's been restored out there. So starting from the east side over here, which is in the blue, that is indicating full restoration. And as I mentioned, everything from the Picayune Canal to the east has been restored, or the construction has been completed, with the exception of plugging the Picayune Canal. So the light green here is partial restoration. Why is it only green and not blue, at least up to the 3 mile mark? As I had mentioned earlier, the canals do have a 2 to 3 mile effect on the groundwater, particularly in the dry season. So it drains the water from those areas. So that's why you're not seeing that as highlighted as being fully restored. So we've plugged the Prairie Canal, as mentioned, 7 miles, 9 miles of the Merritt Canal, 5 miles of the Stair Step Canal. 3 pump stations are constructed. We removed 75% of the roads, 93% of the logging trams that were out there have been removed. As mentioned, the completion for the Southwest Protection Features will be in 2023. The road removal will be done in late 22. And then what remains is the Picayune Canal and the Miller Canal plugging. And this is just kind of highlighting some more of the successes that we've had from the road removal. Again, we've seen a lot of increase in the bird population out there, particularly some of the wading birds. It's helped with the management of the exotic species, exotic plants. This is showing what some of the plugging has looked like. This is the Merritt Canal. It's just amazing when you get out there to see some of the vegetation some of the native vegetation coming back as a result of plugging those canals and having water flowing across the landscape. So that's my brief, pending any questions.
Board members, questions for Steve? Andy, go ahead, just press your button. That should come up on my screen. Thank you.
Steve, I'll start out with a basic question. It's 2026. How are you going to come back and measure the results of the project?
We do have a monitoring plan that we will be implementing, or actually will be implementing now. And it will continue on after the construction is completed to monitor the benefits, to realize the benefits, to make sure that we're realizing the benefits. And we have a process called adaptive management, so that if we do realize we're not receiving those benefits like we thought, then we have a means to adjust some of the features if necessary to try to realize those benefits.
Is there any examples that you could give of the ways of the scientific way you'll be measuring it, be it aquatic populations of certain species or?
Right. They will be looking for, well, I wish I could remember some of those certain species, but I know they do look for.
Indicator species, I guess, of some.
Exactly.
Okay,
Not only in the Strand, but downstream as well within the estuaries.
good. That's what I was also going to, as a follow-up to that, is to, are you going to measure it more in the 10,000 Islands and further south into the Everglades National Park? Will there be studies in that area that are, in essence, we would call it downstream from the project?
Right, there will, yes. So I'm not sure if the Everglades National Park is quite south of our project. I thought
Yes, it is.
more to the east. Okay, well, we will be going out there. Again, we're looking at water quality from, temperature, salinity, other parameters, nutrients, as well as indicator species and vegetation as well.
Okay. And I assume that there's somebody studied that already, because I know the salinity was a huge problem with the Picayune Canal, which is in essence like Niagara Falls coming out at present. Well, it's probably already started to reduce the flows, I assume, to some extent. I'm sure somebody in the room knows that number. But that was a real problem. I actually saw some studies from the 1970s of the impact on the ecosystem around the outflows from the Picayune Canal. They were rather dramatic.
That's correct. So you got a hyposaline or less salinity right there at the outfall of the Picayune, and then you got a hypersaline everywhere else.
Yeah.
So we're trying to spread that water back out across the landscape to dampen the impacts of the salinity, to kind of more stabilize the salinity levels.
Thank you.
Okay.
Vice Chair Waters.
Two questions. First, thanks for the presentation. Very good to see. The one is, I noticed on the one map, it notes remediation areas. Was curious what those are. And then second one is from the areas that we have, in the East End where we have the full hydrologic restoration. What are we seeing in terms of ongoing maintenance that's going to be required? I'm assuming there are some exotic species coming back, or I'd love to hear that there are not, but what does that look like long-term in terms of the ongoing maintenance for those areas once things are restored? At least what are we finding out right now?
So I guess you're referring to the invasive species, invasive plants.
Yes.
Okay, so we do have a management program where we will go out there. The Forestry Service also manages for invasives out there, so they will be doing some treatments regularly. I'm not sure of the frequency, but I know they will be regular. So that would be probably in terms of the only maintenance that we're going to be doing down there for the plugging of the canals. And then in terms of the remediation areas, there's some soil contamination. And that's out there. That's kind of a legacy soil contamination that's been out there. And so we just need to, we can't disturb those areas.
Right.
And they're kind of cordoned off. So we won't be coming near those areas.
Gotcha. You don't want it going downstream. Okay. Thank
Right.
you.
Right.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Ms. Rivera.
Have we had discussions to embark on a partnership with, as we restore the flow across the estuary, to recover or increase or maintain and monitor the health of our seagrasses? And given that we're paying attention to the manatees with with the warm baths, it would be a shame if our seagrass health is not sustained. Are we looking at other type of species that may be impacted with their food source or or that their environment may change?
Kind of, as Mr. Hill was alluding to, what are some of those, how are you going to make sure you're realizing those benefits? And I believe the seagrasses are one of those that we will be sampling for to determine the health of the seagrasses that are in the area.
And is there any plans to monitor the bivalves or promote bringing back some projects of species that existed at one time that have been lost over the last 40 or 50 years that we may now have the opportunity to restore?
Right. All of that, I'm not sure. I know the oysters are one of those that are probably a lot more sensitive. That will be one of that we will be looking for and probably putting some out there to see if they can survive and grow. So we won't be looking at all of them. More or less, we'll look at kind of what's the most sensitive, and then we'll look for those. If they can recover, then we kind of assume that the others are going to be able to have the right environment to survive and thrive.
And I'm assuming that as the sheet flow increases, panthers are going to have to change some of their habits that they have developed. Is that, do we anticipate any impact to them and their food
No, we do
sources?
not.
Okay.
In fact, the Picayune Strand area is the mitigation bank for the panthers for the comprehensive Everglades restoration plan. So that is something that we do look at very seriously. Of course, in conjunction with South Florida and the Fish and Wildlife Service, through the National Environmental Policy Act, the NEPA, or the NEPA process, where we had to evaluate the impact on all of the species that are out there, not just especially the endangered and threatened species. So the panther is something that we look at very closely. And again, it is a mitigation bank for the panthers. So there are upland areas within the Strand. And of course, it flows out there. It's not going to be like just a pool of water year round. I mean, it flows out there and then it will subside during the dry season. So.
Great, thank you. I have a few questions, Steve. First of all, I want to say thank you to you and to the Corps of Engineers for being so open to looking at ways to advance the project, such as the additional plugging of the Picayune Canal so that we could turn on the pump station that's been waiting for work to do out there. So I really appreciate that partnership and that receptivity to, I guess we're calling it concurrent or parallel. It doesn't matter, but doing more than one thing, okay, at the same time. So I really, really appreciate that. Speaking of the Picayune Canal, we've plugged, you stated 3 miles. How long is the canal? How much more do we have to do? Rather than 1/3, 2/3, how many total miles is that canal?
Let's see. I'm pretty sure it's 8 miles. It's 8 to 9 miles. I know it's not longer than 9 miles, but I think it's 8 miles. So if we've got 3 miles, then we have about 5 to 6 miles remaining.
5 to 6. And it was really great how quickly the Corps worked. You began that 3 miles of plugging and the tieback levee, I think in January, and you were done in June. So that was some great work and you made super progress on that. So again, hats off to you for that. Now, when you look at considering the additional plugging for the Picayune, I can understand the Miller to some degree because it's adjacent to the businesses that we're trying to protect from flooding. But you mentioned that there were considerations on the Picayune, I think, during your presentation. And I'm wondering, what are those considerations? Certainly, there's no impact in terms of flooding any businesses out for continuing to plug the Picayune Canal.
Our large scale modeling, I think it was the Geisha model, does indicate that plugging the Picayune Canal will have impacts on the farm. It may be higher groundwater, which you can't have groundwater in the root zone because that will impact the vegetation or the plants out there. So, but the modeling does indicate that it impacts, if we do plug the Picayune Canal, it will impact the farm area.
Completely, if you do it completely like
Correct.
now.
Correct.
But okay, great. That clarifies that. Now, I was in the air on Tuesday for an aerial survey for the Picayune Watershed Water Quality Feasibility Study site. And after we were through with our site recon, we flew over the Picayune, the Strand, and I noticed the Southwest Protection Feature work, but what was unclear to me is where the Southwest Protection Feature, the levee, where it ends. Does it end? You have a map here on one of your slides, but I wasn't sure if that was the South Belmead area here on the left side of the slide here. That red dotted section that goes east to west at the top. Is that South Belmead? I couldn't figure out where the levee was going to end.
So this is where the current levee will end, right? I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but it's right. So so these last two legs right here will not be constructed.
Okay.
It's going to end right in here. I guess I could try to, I don't think I have a better
Okay.
map to show you, but
No, that's a good map there, because that's kind of, it looks like that from the air. It moves up and
that's right.
it
You can see this right here. So this is that little tip right here. You can see where the canal ends, that the ag farm canal, and this is Tomato Road right here.
mhm.
So I don't know if it's so again, it will end right here. It doesn't have those last east-west and then north-south segments.
Okay, but what about to the north? Go back to your map here with, how about now at the northern section?
And then it's going to end right in here. I don't know if we won't be going quite all the way back in here, but we will have this little last north-south segment. I mean, I'm sorry, east-west segment right here at the very top.
Do you know how long that segment is?
Just that one segment?
Yes, meaning to get a feel for where it ends.
No, ma'am, I do not. But I know the total length. So let's say from here to here is 7 miles.
Mhm.
That's the length of the construction, and it's built in kind of at a 90-degree angle, construction to limit the amount of land we're taking to construct the project. Because obviously it would be simpler to build it as a diagonal.
Or straight. I asked, why wasn't it straight?
Right. It would be a lot simpler to construct that way. But then you have these pockets that are just kind of
Mhm.
limbo and wouldn't be restored, and it would just require us to take more land. So
Mhm. Yeah, and I understand that. So how long is the Miller Canal that needs to be plugged? How many miles is the Miller Canal?
that's 8 miles around.
So that's 8 miles.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And on slide number 9.
Okay.
And this was the one that we talked about before the meeting a little bit. The roughly in the scale of this slide, how far from the Picayune pump station does 3 miles go on this slide?
Let's see, that would be 92nd.
Can you point to that?
Small. Here it is right here.
Okay, and then come over to the Picayune Canal.
Union.
Okay, so I'm wondering why we're still showing it in,
Above Stewart. Stewart's one.
right, we saw Stewart. Yeah, that's a great
Above Stewart.
landmark there to look for it. So when I look at your slide and you're talking about no hydrologic restoration, and even though it's been a short period of time since we turned the pump on, when will you recognize that there's been hydrologic restoration since the area is inundated with the water that is sheet flowing now through that first 3.3 miles or 3 miles?
That's a good question.
I'm thinking
You
it
know,
should be green or something at this point.
Different shade, right?
Yes.
Somewhat restored. I agree. I'll have to take a look at that. And again, it's kind of a gradient.
Mhm.
Excuse me. It is kind of a gradient. As you move further away from the canal, you're going to see more restoration.
Sure, sure.
But you're right. Should there be some sort of restoration there? It does seem that there should be some sort of a restoration right there along the canal.
To the east, yeah.
The east, yes, and to the north of Stewart, exactly.
But I'm not a scientist, and I can only use my eyes to see what the water was doing. And the water was doing just like you and the other smart guys and gals modeled. It's flooding out there, and there's a lot of water, and it's actually moving. And so that's why I question the fact that, even though it's been a short period of time, that you have it still yellow. And that's why I mentioned it to you.
Right. Okay, all
All
right.
right, just take a
Definitely
look at that.
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
And I really appreciate everything that you're doing out there and to make this move forward. I noticed that in the area of the Southwest Protection Feature, there's a lot of water. So that may be causing you to have to slow down a bit. I don't know what impact that has.
Yeah, as I mentioned, it did slow them down, but now we've got the ability to come in from the north. So that should help them to somewhat catch up to some of the lost time that they made because of the rain. Just the localized rain right there is quite interesting. In fact, I was driving over yesterday. I could hear the thunder and it was sprinkling. I was in Big Cypress, and it didn't rain over there. But I went out to the levee yesterday afternoon. They said it was a bad storm, but only briefly, only 30 minutes, but nevertheless, it came down. There was high winds, but and it just seems like right there in that area, we've had a lot of rain. So again, they're looking at ways to make up the time to continue to be productive by coming in from the north and working south. So that will certainly help during the wet season. And then once the dry season comes back, they can resume the work from down there and move to the north. So.
Well, that's great that you're looking at all the options to move it forward, because I certainly would be happy, even if it was December of 2024, that we bring this over the finish line in 2024, because it's been out there. This is a first generation comprehensive Everglades restoration project that's still out there unfinished. So, and I know the habitat's being restored because so many species are moving in. So, that's another consideration as we move forward, but I really appreciate it. So is there any public comment on this item, Aaron?
Madam Chair, I have no public comment.
No public comment on that. Okay, I'd like to recognize Mike Duver in the audience. Thank you for being here today. Mike, I don't know if you want to say anything, but certainly I recognize your years of work out there in the Picayune, and Mike's been instrumental in monitoring out there, and his information has been very, very helpful to us. So thank you for being here today. You can speak at the mic if you'd like, but we can't hear you from back there. If you'd like to say a couple words, Mike. Mike and I are usually in the field. Just use one of the microphones so that everybody can hear you.
Yeah, I just I've been working on this for 20 years, and we've been the Corps of Engineers and the district and Fish and Wildlife Service. It's amazing how many people have sort of brought together pieces of it. And it's wonderful to see this thing sort of coming along as it has. And actually, there is a figure that's a little bit more recent than the one that Steve shows. It does sort of define that area that is partially benefited by the Picayune work that was done this far.
So the slide 9 that I was
Right,
asking
right.
about,
So
great,
we're-
great.
we've recognized that. And so, yeah, I'd just like to thank the district and the Corps and everybody for all the work they put into this. I've been trying to see something like this happen since the 70s, and I couldn't be happier.
Well, we're not finished yet, so we still have a lot of time to work together
Right.
on this one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you. If there's no public comment, I think we're done with that item. And I want to thank you again, Steve, for being here, and Colonel Polk for being here and making the drive here to be with us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Roman. I love the video. I'm looking forward to some of the pictures that you just recently took from seeing the whole area hydrated by the floods. And yes, and Mr. Duver is a very big part of this project. We rely on him. He's very passionate, and it's people like that that really, kind of make you look forward to going to work in the morning, So
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And I don't want to overlook our project manager from the district who's here today, Joanna, and Jen leads as well. So they made the trip too to be hear what you had to say, right? So that's great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And I know you guys got to leave, so no worries there. Okay, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is our Basin Flood Resiliency Initiatives presentation by Carolina Moran.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, governing board members. Happy to be here in my first presentation to the BCB board meeting as the District Resiliency Officer for South Florida Water Management District. And we are now going to talk a little bit about our flood resiliency initiatives. So thank you. Let me just make sure I can transition. Yeah, I think I have it. Good. So yes, we are talking about our flood protection system. And this is a picture that illustrates the major features that we have here at the BCB flood control system. We have already aggregating some of the new canals from the Picayune presentation that we just heard. We have now 140 miles of canals, pump stations, 39 water control structures, and including those coastal structures there, Picayune 1, the Henderson Creek 1 and 2, Golden Gate 1 and 2, and then also Coco 1 and 2. One thing that is important to recognize is that flood protection is responsibility of not only one agency, is actually a coordinated effort among different agencies. So we have here the district and BCB managing the primary canals. We also have the secondary system managed by Collier County, and the tertiary system by homeowners, private landowners, and in this specific basin here, Collier County also have a role in some of the, I would say, tertiary system maintenance and operation. And these two next slides that I'm going to talk now, they come together, and I will start with observation. So this is data that we are showing here today that we monitor as an agency. We have a very robust monitoring program at the district, and what we want to focus here is in some of the trends that we can observe. So beyond extensive land development and population increase that we already noticed in the basin here, we are also extrapolating the design criteria in some of those features, flood control features, as a result of significant change also in climate conditions. So sea level rise is consistently documented. Here I have a picture of a tidal station in Naples that shows a steady upward trend. I also have, along with sea level rise, our shallow aquifers representing the integration that we have between surface and groundwater in the entire South Florida. We also see increasing water tables and we talked just in the previous presentation about the importance of recharging aquifers and increasing water tables, but during the wet season, this really results in loss of soil storage. So in some locations, we can see increasing water tables also during the wet season, which reduces our capacity to store flood in the basin. And we are also seeing extreme rainfall events. Here, what we see is a wet season, also upward trend in the region that is here in Southwest Florida. I don't know if you have participated or attended the workshop that we organized in January this year when we presented our work that we are developing. This is the Water and Climate Resiliency Metrics Initiative, where we are really tracking this data and observations and trying to interpret what those trends means. So this is the graphic there on the right showing increasing rainfall is the result of this initial analysis of data. And moving from observations to projections, we are also trying to use our best science to determine how those climate conditions will be evolving into the future. This is not a simple linear extrapolation approach. It's important to recognize that we have many factors that contribute to the upward trends that we are seeing. And the picture on the left here is the regional sea level rise projection established as part of the Picayune project. So this is what we are using on the West Coast as a unified sea level rise projection. The picture in the middle illustrates the results of groundwater modeling efforts, showing, as I mentioned in the last slide, but also predicting into the future, increasing this wet season groundwater elevations. This is a 2060 scenario. And then the map on the right is one of the very preliminary results of our current partnership with the USGS and FIU. I will talk a little bit about that later in the presentation, showing that we have a projected changing factor of about 1.1, 1.2, meaning 10, 20% increase for extreme rainfall in the future. And then we have pictures here really representing the results of this vulnerability in our flood system. So, of course, they are exacerbated by those extreme climate conditions. In this case, was Hurricane Irma back in 2017, September, and we see extensive flooding here over bank of the Golden Gate Canal, and also Golden Gate City Street flooding there on the right. And okay, well, I think we talked a little bit about how critical we are in the system and some of the conditions that we are observing, but it's important also to focus on what we are doing, and it's good to start with like assessments and modeling. You probably heard Akin and his team talk about a flood protection level of service program. That's a robust program that we have in place in the agency, part of our resiliency strategies to really assess the performance of the flood control infrastructure and to ensure our system can provide the desired level of protection now and into the future with the consideration of those changing conditions. So this is a basin by basin assessment that we do, and where we represent the drainage features in each location through this really robust hydrologic and hydraulic models that we have in the agency to understand what are the vulnerabilities now and also into the future. The program results are really helping us to understand like decision-making on how can we prioritize investments and adaptation strategies in the region. The program is structured in 3 parts. So as I mentioned, we start with the assessment, which is really running those models and understanding the conditions in the basin. Phase 2 is when we move to adaptation planning, when we start thinking about projects and solutions that we need to implement in those basins. And then phase 3 is construction. So when we move towards design and construction of the proposed solutions, adaptation solutions. And I think what we need to mention here too is that how we measure this, it's a piece of the assessment that is important to understand. So we have really robust metrics for the canals. So what's the maximum stage that we have in those canals? When does it exceed the banks? Also, what's the discharge capacity in this basin? What is the maximum flood depth that we see on the land, so overland inundation, and also how long, what's the duration that we see for the flooding there? And focusing on the tidal structure, the end of the system, what's the capacity during the storm surge, and what's the peak stage also caused by this drainage and sea level rise conditions. I mentioned the flood protection level of service program. It was advanced here for the BCB Basin back in 2018. And here is a brief summary of the results that we have so far. So on the right, what we can see is overall assessment of the basins here. We have 3 basins that were assessed back in 2018. So the overall conditions in those basins, the yellow top is Cocohatchee, and we see the yellow represents a 10-year return period. So that means a 10-year rainfall event might cause flooding in this basin. In the middle, we have Golden Gates, and we have a 5-year return there. And then on the bottom, we have Henderson Creek, and we have 25-year return, rainfall return period there. So what does that mean is for current conditions, ideally the design is for a 25 rainfall event. If we have a 25 rainfall event, we might be able to handle the flood in the system. Below that, we are already like below the capacity, the design capacity that we had for the system. And in the future, you see that all the basins jump to an orange condition, which is a 5-year return. So we are reducing the capacity of the system in the future. I listed here on the left some of those critical flooding conditions. So the assessment gives the overall condition at the basin, but the flooding occurs in some specific locations. So for Golden Gate Basin, we see flooding in the Corks Creek Canal in the vicinity of GG1 when we have a 5-year rainfall event. We also have a 10-year rainfall event causing flooding in Golden Gate States. And then Golden Gate Canal and all the adjacent upland areas west of I-75 there, under a 3 feet of sea level rise scenario, we also see flooding. And important to note in this basin is also we have increased water table conditions in the wet season, west of the Collier Boulevard and also south of the Pine Ridge Road. So those are the main findings for this basin of this assessment. And then for the Cocohatchee Basin, we have Cocoa Tree Canal out of bank exceedances that occur with a 10-year rainfall event. We also have the downstream end of Cocohatchee Canal under a 3 feet of sea level rise scenario, also showing some critical flooding conditions. And finally, at the Henderson Bell Mead Basin, we have a significant stage and overland inundation increase all along the canal in all the 3 sea level rise scenarios. Finally, I'm going to start moving to closing this presentation with the recognition of this historic and largest investment so far in our state of Florida to address flooding and sea level rise resiliency issues. So on May 12 this year, the Governor DeSantis signed into law Senate Bill 1954, which is making over $600 million available to support efforts to ensure our state and local communities are prepared to deal with the impacts of sea level rise, intense rainfall, and also flooding. We recently established a working group to identify and describe our most attractive projects that might be eligible under this opportunity here. And this is a map that shows like district-wide resiliency needs and opportunities. So we're here just showing that we have a number of structures that are exposed to sea level rise impacts. And of course, the higher the projection, more structures are impacted by that. And we use this analysis to start bringing to a document what are our needs, what are the opportunities, and what are the priority projects that we have in the basin, district-wide, of course. For the basin here, for the BCB Basin, we selected this project. This is what we are calling a self-preservation mode for the critical coastal structures. What this project is proposing is to optimize the opening and the closing of the gate times to really maximize our ability to operate this gate during storm surge events. So we want to avoid unnecessary or too early lockouts when we have to close the gate open because we lost the capacity to operate during a major storm event. And really, sometimes we have to do that too early because of the forecasted conditions are showing impact in the region. But then later, because we don't have the full remote capability to operate those gates, we probably would not have needed to close the gate too early, or we could have just better operated the gate. So that's what we are proposing here is a self-preservation system that would enhance mechanical and electronic components really to help us operate as part of the hardening strategies for Those structures listed here, we have Cocoa 1, 2, and 3, the Golden Gate 1 and 2 and 3 as well, and Henderson Creek 1. So that's where we are proposing to install this backup controller and other automation features for this specific project. We have additional planning projects also included in this document. This is a picture of our draft document that we are preparing for this opportunity. So we have, of course, recurrent needs to advance flood protection level of service program in this basin and other basins. We have also data needs that we are continuing to invest. So the metrics that I just described, flood condition, groundwater modeling, and saltwater interface that we do every 5 years. So just enhancing our capacity there. Hydro monitoring data that we, of course, have to continue to invest. Regional climate models, and also flooding events, mapping and database, just a collection of those previous events. And I'm going to talk really quickly about 2 of those projects. So one ongoing effort is this estimation of future rainfall. This is a big piece of also that we want to bring to the flood protection level of service and other assessments. So we are partnering with the USGS and Florida International University to evaluate all the global climate model downscaling data sets that we have available now, estimating rainfall changes to 2070. We have initial results for the 16 counties. We are also going to be proposing intensity duration frequency curves that we see extracted from those models, and really hoping this will strengthen our planning capacity to allow us to do more robust future rainfall scenarios in our modeling efforts. And a final effort is our flood damage cost estimate tool as part of phase 2 of the FPLOS. When we start really evaluating project alternatives, we also need to understand what is the cost benefit of those alternatives. So we are building a tool that we can run with our basin data, looking at FEMA, HAZUS, and other information that is important for us, the traditional methods that is used all around to evaluate those cost benefits and allow us to make comparison among the project alternatives. Final message here is we need to recognize that we have significant progress in the region efforts, looking at resiliency. So we are closely coordinating with all those other projects, agencies that are also working on resiliency initiatives. They vary, the focus of those efforts vary from like coastal, storm surge driven to rainfall, drainage driven, other protections, the importance of also bringing natural-based solutions as part of this. So here I'm mentioning that we have Collier County working on a few of those projects, recognizing again the University of Florida and Florida Gulf University Picayune project that is looking at those nature-based solutions and storm surge protection, and also combining with the drainage and flood protection inland system through a partnership with us at the district. We have the Army Corps back-based study in the region, also proposing alternatives there. We have the compact, we have the newest Southeast Florida Regional Resiliency Compact that is beginning to also prioritize projects and investments in the region. And of course, a series of other coordinated efforts. So recognizing that we need to work in partnership and collaboration with a series of other initiatives. So thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, questions for Carolina from the board. All right, Mr. Hill?
I guess you're inferring, should we invest in a lot of boots? Seems like we're going to have a lot of, if I could surmise somewhat sarcastically to your comments, it seems like we should expect more heavier rains and more rain events, and that'd be the tropical depressions or hurricanes. Would that be kind of like what you're suggesting? And therefore we got to deal with a huge amount of water in a short period of time, and drainage is a challenge. And then obviously this board will have to deal with that issue. That seemed like the direction you're going with your presentation.
Yeah, we are trying to really understand with some science advancements how far we want to be able to invest in those hardening strategies. We don't want to use more money than is needed. And we also, of course, want to be able to understand what are going to be the critical conditions in the future. So trying to understand how those extreme rainfall events occur is an important piece of what we need to assess and to evaluate and really measure what is going to be the significance of that and what's the impact in our needs and infrastructure investments.
Okay. just as a follow-up, looking at the charts of the change in sea level, it appeared to me, and just looking at it visually, has there been a significant increase in the more recent time?
Yes.
So we're increasing it at an accelerating rate then?
Yeah, we see an acceleration on the past 5 years.
Okay.
There are some studies coming on to try to understand where does it come from. There is some relation with the slow of the Gulf current, Gulf Stream current, and we are also trying to evaluate and partnering with other agencies. Army Corps is is developing a study right now that we are trying to look at that as well, to
Okay.
see if this acceleration is something that is just one event that is happening, or if this is a result of a more long-term trend.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Waters?
Thank you for the presentation first. Very good. And more a comment than anything. One thing that I see in here that I like a lot is the evaluation and trying to project what these rainfalls are going to be in the future. I think something that hopefully we learned, or that, opened our eyes during 2017 when Hurricane Irma hit, was it wasn't just that we got Irma. It was that, in the months before Irma, we had so much rain that everything was surcharged, and it made Irma that much harder to deal with. So, some of these were items like sea level rise. There are people that are studying this their entire life that we don't know what that number is going to be in 2050 or 2100. But the more we can make projections and kind of make educated guesses as to where that's going to be, but also recognize that precipitation patterns are changing. And so we may deal with more extreme rainfall on top of those elevated groundwater conditions is important. So compliment you on that, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. Yeah, that's definitely the compounding flood impacts of having rainfall, sea level rise, and antecedent groundwater conditions is definitely the key that we need to understand.
Are we seeing any indicators with the precipitation at this point?
So we have, that's a great question. Thank you, Mrs. Chairman. So, Madam Chair, so what we have is the current data that we are using is downscale data sets that come from global climate models that are coarse resolution. They have a little bit of noise on how we read those. They are all showing potentially increase. And I mentioned 10 to 20%, but I have to dig a little bit down in the numbers to make sure this is the range that I want to present to you. The results are going to be coming available to the public late in the fall. But we see a little bit of noise. So some of the models are showing 10, some of the models might be showing 20, and we don't know yet how to handle that. But we are working with a group of experts on how it's going to be a recommendation. How do we want to start using and doing some guidance on how we can start using these available models results. So another effort that we are asking for funding as part of this plan as also is advancing a regional climate model for Florida, where we can capture the drivers of rainfall occurrence here. So really like looking at tropical storms, sea breeze, and other convective rainfall creation. So how does that really occurs in Florida, and how can we have a more resolution to perhaps have less uncertainty in how we are projecting the rainfall? So all the models are showing potential increase. This is a 10% in the next stream for critical rainfall events, and we are hoping to reduce this range when we have a more specific high resolution model for Florida.
Excellent. Ms. Rivera?
Great presentation. My question has to do a little bit more with this self-preservation or automation, remote automation of the gates in the opening and closing. Given that you work throughout the entire South Florida Water Management District, have we already implemented that level of automation that you're recommending for Collier County or the Basin? Have you already implemented it in, let's say, on the East Coast, and did you get the results you were expecting, or?
No, this project includes also structures in the East Coast. So we are proposing the same type of investments for coastal structures also in the East Coast.
Okay, so there hasn't been a demonstration project already completed or anything like that?
I can confirm with Lucine. I believe some of the structures might have a limited capacity, like I would say better capacity to operate remotely. But most of the coastal structures from the CNSF system do not have, and they are included as part of this project as well.
Okay, thanks.
Lucinda, she's the expert here.
So we're looking at all the coastal structures. What do they have in place? What's the flood elevation that's going to impact? So during Hurricane Irma, we had to lock out our generators and then lock because we were concerned about water intrusion with storm surge. So because of the storm surge, we locked out the generators and locked the gates in place. Now, that delay time to go back and put everything back online and start operating the gates as intended can be an issue. So the intent was, how do we get these structures so kind of flood proofing them, making sure that the electronics and the generators aren't going to be impacted by a storm surge to the best of our ability. We can't probably, protect against a Cat 5, but what can we protect against?
So you're hardening
Yes,
the network cases.
exactly. The things that can short, with water and that type of thing. So
Thanks.
you're welcome.
I have a couple of questions, Carolina. When I look at slide 7, when you're looking at assessing the current and future flood risk, when you identify the colors on the map as high, moderate, or low, what exactly do you mean?
So that was an initial assessment done by the flood protection level of service team in the beginning of the program when they said, where do we start? Which basin should we address first? They look at observations like past flooding events, occurrences where they were more critical. They look at the age of the infrastructure, the conditions of the coastal structure itself, and then determine which basins would be more critical to start with. So that's the color that we have in this map. So the lowest coast in BCB was actually one of the first ones. We have a hatch here too, but those were the critical basins that we have recognized in the beginning of the assessment that we needed to be addressed. Of course, when we dig deeper in the assessment, we will clearly understand what are the flood conditions in those basins, and they vary. This was the way the program was determined to start, where they start, which basins they would target first.
Okay. Another question that I have, and it goes back to this precipitation discussion that we were having here just a moment ago. When we talk about a 5-year, 10-year, and 25-year flood event, we use those terms now, and we use these terms before climate change. So how are we working at defining those now, and how have they changed, and what do they mean? And I don't know if you have all those answers, but it seems like at least my brain is numb from a 5-year, 10-year, and 25-year flood event. And I feel like in the time of climate change now, these terms have changed. And I know they're used by insurance agencies and everything else. How are they being defined, and how does that get populated throughout everyone who uses these terms?
Yeah, your question goes back to the concept of non-stationary, because the way we design those systems is based on an assumption that we are assuming the weather is stationary. So we talk about 5, 25, 10-year event, assuming that what happened in the past is going to occur in the future. This is something that is changing, but not yet incorporated as part of design. So establishing what criteria we're going to use for design. So this is something that we need to evolve as part of this entire process. But we're still using this definition of 10, 5, 25-year event as part of the design criteria. What we see is, for instance, a 25 rainfall event might be occurring a little bit more frequently, and we might say in the future it's going to become a 10-year event or something. We need more time, and we need more data to really evaluate exactly what a 25-year event is going to be in the future, but we are beginning to observe that. So what this study that we are doing now with the USGS is doing is trying to reflect that, giving new numbers, IDF curves that was going to show us what are the numbers associated with a 25-year event, with a 50-year event, trying to incorporate the changes that we anticipate that might occur in the future.
Well, simply, what is the definition of a 25-year event?
So what we do for a 25-year event, we look at the entire period of record, and we look at when so for the entire period of record, we fit a curve, a statistical curve, and we look at like, what is the amounts that we see on the curve that represents like every 25 years, we might have a rainfall event that is of this magnitude. However, it doesn't mean we're going to have just one every 25 years. It means we have a chance that is related to let me do the math here, like the 100 is 1% chance of occurrence for that specific event. So looking at the entire period of record, we might not have 100-year record, but then that's why we fit a curve, a probabilistic distribution curve, and we look at this curve to understand what is the projected 1% chance of rainfall occurrence.
Just if I could give you just a little context on it, a 25-year event in our area would be, these frequencies also go along with them durations. And so you'd say, okay, there's a 25-year event that may have a 3-day duration. In our area, that would be about 11 inches. And I think what the study is going to do is look at how that's changing and may try and project and say, okay, if we have decided what we want is our communities to be dry or our roads to be dry in a 25-year event, which, has a chance of, a 4% chance of happening in any year. We may say in the future, in 20 or 30 years from now, we think instead of being 11 inches of rain over 3 days, it could be 14 inches of rain over 3 days, and we should design our facilities accordingly. And so that's, it will be hard to project what that change is going to be, but I think it's worth looking at what is happening and trying to guess where it goes in the future. And I think, as Carolina said, just because you have, Irma was a perfect example. There were some spots, particularly Bonita Springs was one that they had, I would assume, probably a pretty close to 2 25-year events 3 weeks apart from one another. And it just makes the impact of that second storm so much greater.
Exactly. Thank you, Dan. So you'll be able to come back then to the board and to tell us what is changing in terms of how these events are defined at some point.
Yes, we're going to have those initial data released from USGS later in the fall. We will be presenting to the entire district, and we're happy to come here to the board and present the results specifically that are for Southwest Florida.
Or whenever you have something to update us on regarding climate change and resiliency planning, because there's things that we have to consider budgeting for and things that we need to consider prioritizing. And so it's great if you would update us, come back and update us from time to time to let us know how we're progressing with the information so that we can get ahead of the game. So I'd appreciate that, Carolina, and I want to thank you for your presentation. Erin, is there any public comment on this item?
Madam Chair, I have no public comment.
No public comment? Okay, we'll move on then. And we'll go on to, thank you, Carolina, appreciate it. We'll move on to the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget presentation with Candy Heater.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. Well, this is a exciting, monumental day. We made it. So many of us are very happy for this day.
Especially you, right, Candy?
Especially myself and Mark and Lisa and Derek and many others. So today's presentation, we will finalize the fiscal year 21-22 millage rate, as well as briefly go over the revenue and expenditure budget and then the highlights. And then at the end, just as in July, we'll have 2 motions for approval. And they're in order in which we must approve them. Millage first, budget second. So the first item to discuss is the proposed millage rate for fiscal year 21-22. There's no change in this information from what was presented in July. So the Big Cypress Basin millage rate for fiscal year 2020, 2021 was 0.1152 mils. The rolled back rate for fiscal year 21, 22 is 0.1116 mils. The proposed rate for discussion today and requesting for approval is the rolled back millage rate at 0.1116 mils. That is a 0% change from the rolled back, meaning it is the rolled back rate. And the change from the prior year, so the change from the fiscal year 2021 millage rate is a reduction of 0.0036. So to translate that to dollars, the 0.1116 mils is $11.16 per $100,000 of taxable value, and the savings is 36 cents compared to the fiscal year 2021. So an example that is on the slide is a homeowner in Collier County with an average home valued at $500,000 would pay $55.80 for the year. And then we laid out on this slide some examples that $55.80, the services that the funding or the money, the revenue that the taxpayer pays receives. So of which one would be flood control and protection, canal maintenance and vegetation removal, future water supply, ecosystem restoration, modeling of sea level rise, and ecosystem restoration. So many of the things that have been discussed today.
And I want to thank, I think it was you, Mr. Hill, that made that suggestion at our last meeting, that would be good information to know. So I think that, yes, I think that it really resonates to see how much you get for your money.
Thank you. So moving on to the budget, there's no change in the budget, either in the revenue categories or the expenditure categories from the July presentation. So the budget is $17,442,227 million. Revenue and expenditure is balanced. That is a requirement. You have to have a balanced budget. Ad valorem taxes being the largest of the revenue sources, using some of your fund balance due to what we had discussed at July because of some increases due to the capital program, which Lucine will be discussing the capital program after myself. And then the larger portion of the expenditures, the capital program, flood control operations under Rich Virgil and Jesus and Juan. And then obviously some of the funding for the regional partnership projects. So something that is a little different in the presentation that we like to do is we like to highlight who's going to be responsible for performing and getting the work done for the Big Cypress Basin and for you. So the administrative services and executive offices it will be responsible for the general services and facilities work, as well as the control room. The Big Cypress Basin, which is Lisa and her staff. Some of the highlights are, the Collier County Settlement Agreement, the Picayune Water Quality Treatment Site Analysis, and the Regional Projects Program. Ecosystem Restoration and Capital Projects Division under Miss Jennifer Reynolds. That is a little over $8 million, and that is the area that's responsible for your capital projects, Lucine, as well as some of the modeling efforts. Field Operations Division under Rich Virgil, Jesus, and Juan. That is the field station operations. Information Technology Division, which is under Dwayne Piper. He has the SCADA group that report to him, and they're responsible for the SCADA system here for the Basin. Real estate and land management is Stephen Collins. He is over the land management and vegetation group, and they are responsible for the land management activities for the Collier County portion of Crew lands. And then the debt service fees and charges, which is your hurricane emergency reserves, property appraiser, tax collector fees, and self-insurance program that falls under administrative services, but it's labeled out separately here because it has separate controls on it to where you can't touch it in the financial system unless needed. So moving on, the next steps, we do have 2 public hearings after this meeting at the district headquarters, September 9th and September 21st. The 9th is the tentative hearing and the 21st is the final hearing at 5:15. This brings us to the end of the presentation where we move on to the motions for the millage and for the budget.
Is there any board comment before we move on to the motions?
No.
Okay, yeah, Erin, is there any public comment at this point?
I have no public comment, Madam Chair.
Okay, with no public comment, no further board comment, I'll ask for a motion on the very first motion to approve, and I would ask that the motion maker please read the motion. Yeah, I have the motion, please.
Yeah, ma'am, I'll go ahead and read the
Okay,
motion. So
thank
make a
you.
motion to approve a resolution of the Big Cypress Basin Board of the South Florida Water Management District approving the submittal of the rolled back millage rate of 0.1116 mils for fiscal year 2021 to 2022, requesting that the governing board of the South Florida Water Management District to levy ad valorem taxes within the Big Cypress Basin based on that rate to finance basin function contains in the fiscal year 2021 to 2022 basin budget.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
I second.
Ms. Rivera seconds. Then we'll go ahead and vote. Vice Chair Waters,
Yes.
Ms. Rivera,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So that motion passes 4-0. The next motion, I will entertain a motion from a motion maker on this one as well. I would ask that you please read the motion. Do I have a motion, please?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve a resolution of the Big Cypress Basin Board of the South Florida Water Management District submitting the fiscal year 2021 to 2022 basin budget in the amount of $17,442,227 to the governing board of the South Florida Water Management District for inclusion in the district budget.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Ms. Rivera seconds. We have a motion and a second. We'll now vote. Vice Chair Waters,
Yes.
Ms. Rivera,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
and I vote yes, and the motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Excellent job. This presentation has come a long way. Candy, thank you and your staff for all the hard work you do on this.
Thank you. Thank you. And I don't mean to speak after you, but I would like to take the opportunity to thank staff. I'd like to thank Lisa and her staff, Derek as well, Rich and his staff, Juan, Mark Wiederstein, who's in the audience with us, and budget staff. There's many hands that touch this, and I'm simply just the presenter. So I just want to thank all of them and thank you as a board for your direction. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Candy.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the capital plan update with Lucene Dadrian.
Thank you. So the last board that I presented at, we went over the 5-year capital plan. We also went over some reallocations of current year budgets. So this presentation is just for this year, where we're at currently with construction and design. So this is what we had presented at that last board, where we reallocated some funds and moved some funds to the field station for security. In addition, we rebudgeted 1.22 million into next year's budget. So that's why next year's budget is larger. So we're going to spend the money hopefully in the year that we've encumbered the funds. So we have kicked off a lot of construction this year. The first project we call SCADA replacements, but this is really either we're replacing a site, or it's a new site, or it's a stage recorder. It's just kind of a bucket of different types of telemetry and water readings. So Cork 1 and GG 67 are both downstream structures of those two structures. So we're getting that reading downstream. We have the upstream already, and we need the downstream. The DeSoto 10 is a stage recorder. So it just stands out there on its own. It helps us with determining how to move water within the system. So this was kicked off a while ago, and we had some issues with some constructability issues on a couple of sites. So the contractor proposed a different method. We have two standards. One is concrete piles and one is stainless steel and aluminum. So we switched two of the sites from concrete to the metal application. So the contractor recently mobilized to the site, and even though we had a few delays on deciding how to move this forward, contractor is still on schedule to complete it within the contract time, which is great. In addition, the BCB field station security updates, we kicked this off after that last meeting approval. There were some fence repairs that were required prior to the perimeter alarm installation. And from what I understand, the work is ongoing and hopefully will be complete in October. So the Cypress 1 structure relocation came up for two reasons. One, we were looking at the end of its service life, and the fact that Collier County wanted to expand Vanderbilt Beach Road extension. So we got together, we determined, well, if we need to move everything south, we would replace the structure. Collier County is doing the canal work as well as demolition of the old structure once the new canal and structure are in service. So this was approved at the district's May governing board, and we issued NTP end of June. And we've had the contractor is submitting submittals for what's required. We have to review all the submittals, but we're in progress. And we look to have construction mobilization by the end of the month. I know it says mid-August, but by end of month. So the next project that's currently been executed for construction is the remote operations of Cork 2 and the generator building and site improvements at Picayune 5. So Cork 2 is really, it's a manual structure. It's the furthest structure we need to get to open, close the gates almost on a daily basis. This takes a lot of time for the field station staff and takes them away from doing other great work that they do. So this was one of those sites we decided to add remote operations. And then the generator building at Picayune 5, it's one of our critical flood control structures for the basin. And if it's a critical control structure, then it requires a generator backup, and it required a new building and new generator that needed to be replaced. So this project was awarded in July at July's governing board, and we have a construction notice to proceed in September. So those three or four projects were kind of newer construction projects that only recently got kicked off in the last quarter. Here are two projects that are coming to completion. Melloware number 3, all gates are replaced. So this structure was built back in 2014. It was built with two gates that could open up and down from both sides. And what happened and how that was designed ended up being a problem, and it would bind, and we would have issues fully opening to the required gate elevations. So this became a reliability issue and an operational issue. So we moved very quickly with in-house staff and put together a design and got this out on the street so that it's another critical flood control structure and needs to be operational. So this work is basically complete. The site's been certified for it's in operation. And, hopefully we'll close the contract out by the end of the month or into September, but we're basically done and ahead of schedule on this project. So this was great great team, in-house team getting this work done. So everyone appreciates the work that everyone's put into that. So the other project is what we call electrification. We have these 3 manual control structures, Cork 1, County Road 951 North and South. So these 3 sites basically were very difficult to operate, and we added a lot of equipment and platforms and push button operations so that we can go to the field station, go to the site, hit a button and operate the structure. Previously, it was a safety issue, and it was unreliable and difficult to operate. So all sites have been commissioned. This project's a few months late, but we're complete by the end of this month, and all sites are online. So moving into projects and design, canal improvements, we have, I've spoken about these before, but we've broken them out into Miller and C1 Connector Canal, the I-75 in green, and the Cypress Canal. So we did modeling and assessments on all 3 of these systems. The work for Cypress was completed in-house and was completed early back in January. The other 2 will be complete by September and November. And from that, we'll be able to decide, how do we want to move forward? What do we think is affordable to fix the system? So more to come on that, and we'll know which projects we can feed to the capital program from there. The Picayune bank stabilization, this has been a discussion in the past. What do we do with the receding right-of-way and canal banks? We completed a preliminary design. The consultant completed this, and we're evaluating it because we think it's very expensive to do the work, and it's actually going to maybe even take away some conveyance from the canals to do a proper fix with bank stabilization and riprap, et cetera. So we need to evaluate further. What do we want to do? Do we want to look at right-of-way acquisition, or are there any other alternative erosion protection measures that we can do? But this is not going to be an inexpensive fix. So we need to do more homework on this. And then the last project in design, again, skater replacements. We are adding HC1, Henderson Creek 1 is a replacement site. And then Airport Road 2 and County Road 951 North are both new sites. So we should have that design complete, and we should be ready to advertise in September.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
Are there any board comments or questions for Lucine? Any public comment, Erin?
I have no public comment, Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you, Lucine, for your presentation today and keeping us straight on all the capital projects. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, your support.
Okay, this is brings us to board comment, our first board comment part of the agenda. Is there any board member who has any comments at this time? Mr. Hill.
Yeah, something I was just wondering about when I was reading the financial materials, and I came across budget for public awareness, and there was a 0 in there. And I was just thinking out loud as to whether there is not opportunity for awareness, a great awareness that we should publicize to our community as to what we do and some of the other issues that we deal with, water quality, which is a little bit not entirely our responsibility, but a big issue, obviously, to our community as a whole. And just in general, certainly about what our responsibility is as the basin in management of storm water and other things. Just wondering about that, whether that isn't a consideration or there could be a strategy towards that. I guess I put that on Lisa's to comment. Maybe there's something we can do, and I'm just again thinking out loud. So I didn't even have the chance to formalize something, but I just saw an opportunity there when I was looking over the materials today.
Any comment, Candy?
So thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. And the dollars that we can look at to move into that program category
Mhm.
are down under district management and administration under Lisa's budget. It's simply crosswalking of codes.
Okay.
So what we can do is take that portion of the budget by working with Lisa and with you and move it up into that category to where then it does stand out because there is funding and the communication. It's mapped under district management and administration.
Okay, that's nice to know, but maybe if there was, I'm more interested in the activity as opposed to whether we need to formally adopt that portion of the budget. But I just came across it.
Well, I think what I would suggest is that we have Lisa give that some thought since it just came up and come back to us with maybe some ideas that she may have on that. How does that sound to the board? Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really great things that I've learned in the last few months that I've been on the board that not a lot of people know about.
Oh, I know. Yes.
So anyhow, thank you.
Well, thanks. Thank you, Andy, for that. Any other board comment before? Ms. Rivera?
Yes, I would like to share with the other board members. I traveled with Mr. Betancourt and with Jesus the other day to take a look at the tree removal process. And they have had a unexpected positive benefit to that community. And that was that prior to the tree removal, there had been some homeless living among the trees in the forest. And just recently there was a grammar school opened on a building that became available to them, a Montessori school. And having these homeless neighbors to the playgrounds of the school had become a worrisome problem for that community. And this was resolved by the BCB activities and by the BCB personnel. So it's not just water that we deal with. So, and apparently it was very successful and done in a manner where the community has embraced the work that they're doing there.
That's really great feedback. I think that this has been some of the best public outreach that we've done on any of our canal maintenance projects that we've had in the basin. And it's evidenced by the fact that the phones have been pretty silent and everyone that we reached out to was on board before we started the work. And I know that Mr. Betancourt is going to address that in his presentation, but I think that it just shows that the more transparent you are in your work, the better the benefits. Thank you for that. Any other board comment at this time? Okay, we'll go on then to the technical reports. And speaking of which is Mr. Betancourt. What a great lead in for you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. Thank you, Ms. Rivera. That's very encouraging. We have a good group and they're working as much as they can to get things done and to actually do things for the community. So I think we're still working on that. We're not going to stop. We're going to make it better. And of course, we just want to help. We'll make it happen. So thank you very much. So as part of what I've been talking about today, I'm just going to give you a quick briefing on what the field station been working on for the last month or so. Let me see how to make this work. So as for the general overview for this month, we've been, of course, doing some maintenance activities throughout the BCB AOR. We've been, I will be giving you a status report on the remedy tracking tool that we have implemented. I'll be giving you another quick briefing on the tree removal project on I-75 and Kokohashi Canal, and of course, the 3-month outlook. As part of what we have been working on for maintenance activities, we have been replacing signs. It's been a big effort by the field station team. So far this year, we have replaced over 15 signs throughout the area. And this is just an example on the Kokohashi Canal, which basically the sign was fading, was leaning, and we replaced it. And on this slide, you can see the before and after picture of that. Again, as part of the maintenance activities for FU5, we had to replace the stem boot throughout the structure. These are some pictures of the before. Just for general information, the stem boots are basically the covers that for the stem, for the valve stems, to protect the stems from the grease that we put on the stem from debris, dust, foreign objects that may impede the right operation of the valve gate. So I want to show you some of these pictures here. This slide shows the before. This is a specific detail of one of the stem boots that we replaced. And on this slide, you see the complete structure on FU5 with all the stem already replaced. And I mean, seems like a simple task, but the guys spend quite some few time out there because it just takes time to replace them and more than one person to do it. So, you know. Again, for some of the maintenance activities on Miller Tree, we had to replace the bow barriers. As you can see on the before picture, those bow barriers were really fading. They were in bad shape. We replaced them for tough booms. And again, the effort from the team is right now, you see the picture, it seems like a simple thing, but actually, you know, it requires the use of heavy equipment, use of towboats, the use of many people just to take the tough booms across the canal, tie them together, put them together in a way that, you know, that is going to work to hold up some of the vegetation and debris going against the structure. Something that seems like it's just an ongoing thing is debris removals. And here on this slide, you see the before and after picture of some of the debris that we had to pull actually from that culvert on the left on the before picture. All that branches, pieces of wood, whatever, were under that culvert, and they were taken out by hand. And again, you know, something that you think is going to be simple, it took us the whole day to do so. Something that, and you have to do it and keep up doing it, because that's basically restricts the water flow in any canal and can actually do damage to structures, gates, and so on and so forth. Again, some debris removal, and this is on the 951 canal. This is part of why we have to have tough booms. You see all the accumulation of garbage, vegetation, debris that is being thrown in some of these canals, and how the team, with the help of the Long Reach, and that's the picture on where it says before, you know, they were doing it, and right after we finished, that's how it came out to be. So just to give you a quick status on our new remedy tracking tool, we've been tracking the different complaints from the community, and you know, we can now we can actually put it in a way that can be seen in a graphic way, and keep some statistics on this. And you see, like for bank erosion, since 5/24th, we've been dealing on just one issue. The Basin Canal, it's been around 4 issues that we had. And this is up to 8/19th, so of course this keeps, we keep updating this report as we get more complaints and more issues. Some of the right-of-way maintenance, we had 3 issues that we resolved, and there actually one more issue that we need to take care of. On shoreline blockage, we only have 1 issue. On structure maintenance, 1 issue, and of course 1 issue on vehicle in a canal that we took care of with help of the county and law enforcement. And then going back to the tree removal project, and this, now that I see this slide, seems like it was so long ago, because by now we're almost finished the tree project. And again, let me just go through this slide real quick. We got 3 quotes. Merico INC was the lowest company that provided the best bid for the project. We did a wildlife survey back in August 3rd. The project started on August 9th. And of course, we keep updating the website so people can go in there and see how the status of the report goes, or the project goes. Let me just move. This is just a quick sketch of the area that we're talking about. This is the I-75 loop, Kokuhashi Canal. And so, sorry, let me go back to that. So the project at this point is all the trees have already been taken out. We're just staging all the debris in just one section. We've been kind of moving all the debris away from the site. It's been a slow process because we just had the storm last week. It's been kind of raining. We don't want to damage the area, so it's been kind of slow. But we're hoping to have everything done by the end of next week, weather permitting. And if we can actually get people to move the debris out of there, because it's just been slow. So, okay. As part of what we're going to be looking at for the next 3 months, we will continue on canal maintenance, mechanical harvesting, vegetation management, debris removal on the different canals, and out of the tough wounds with barriers. For structure maintenance, we are going to continue our yearly work plan by performing preventative maintenance to the various structures we have. We're hoping to finish the tree removal project. And then on system operations, we'll continue supporting the operational orders given by the water managers as the rainy season keeps on going. For the SERP, Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Project, we had an issue with at the Mary pump station with the turbocharger. Actually got banged. We had to replace it. And these are some pictures of the guys, of our guys doing the job. And so, and of course, for the 3-month outlook, we're ready to respond to any, to the wet season activities, orders, and issues. We're going to continue monitoring, updating, logging the operational parameters, pressure, temperature, vibration, output volumes of all the pump stations, the Mary and Faca pump station. And we'll be doing the housekeeping and safety monitoring of all the pumps, motors, and accessories. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Is there any board questions for Juan? I have a question. On your remedy tracking status, slide 10 that you showed, you had one incident of bank erosion. What is that exactly?
Along the bank, along the canal bank, there's an area that has been eroded. And basically, we get the call from one of the neighbors, basically asking to see if there was anything that we could do. And this particular one was at the airport canal that we actually along the boardwalk, there was some erosion issues that they, as people would go by, would see it, and they call on the field stations. We actually went out there, kind of evaluated the area, filled the spots with some material, compacted it, and put it back to standard. So that's basically what we did.
So from your professional opinion, to help me understand, because Lucene had brought this up, and I had talked with Alan Shirkey too about the cost of bank stabilization. What's the fine line between bank erosion and bank stabilization? At what point does it need to be stabilized versus just fix the erosion? Can you help me understand that and the board understand that?
Erosion, I mean, stabilization of the bank. You want to go ahead?
No, Juan, what I'm asking you is when you respond, right? You made an evaluation of the bank and determined that it was eroded and that you guys could just fill it in. When is it serious enough, I guess, that you need to stabilize it versus just fill it in? I'm trying to understand it.
So there are a lot of canals within the basin that the field station can maintain because there's right-of-way access, and the canals aren't maybe as big. But when you have a larger canal like Picayune, you have maybe higher flows. You start to see erosion. You need to add erosion protection measures because your flows are higher and larger in volume. But the smaller canals are easier to repair and you don't need to do bank stabilization.
So it's basically the same thing,
Right.
but on a larger, higher flow canal, it would take what more?
You would need to, for a proper repair, you would, determine what your velocities are. And if you're going to put something back in place that's just material, sediment, then you may erode that away again.
Mm-hmm.
So you do your calculations and you determine, do I need to place riprap? So the district's design for riprap is filter fabric, bedding stone, and then a riprap sized for that velocity, depending on, what your velocities are, is this type of stone that gets placed.
Yeah, Alan Shirkey gave me a regular presentation on our current projects for bank stabilization and their cost. And because I had asked for it after his presentation at the governing board, and it's very expensive. But so what you're saying is that we probably won't need to stabilize as many canals here in the BCB, that most of our work is going to be repairing erosion.
Correct. In the smaller canals, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and this bank erosion that we had to do, it was a minor, compared to the scale that she's talking about, it was just a minor repair. I mean, it still would take a couple of days for the material to be brought out to the state, to the area, and to because of the traffic and all the different things going on during the day. But we actually finished it within 2-3 days. That once we found it.
And for a minor repair like that, roughly what does that cost? When you add up all the labor and everything else that your guys do and everything, what does that cost? I mean, just roughly, if you know, just a general ballpark figure.
What I would say, we have to include the labor cost, the diesel of the equipment being used. We'll have to add probably the labor, the equipment cost. That would be to get a good estimate. We'll have to get an equipment rental. How much would that be? Since we have our own equipment, we can use our equipment. That wouldn't include any costs related to that. And then, of course, the cost of the material, depending on the type of material that we have, that we need to use. I can give you a better answer once I calculate all that, and it depending, of course, on the area and the volume that we're gonna
I
repair.
was just trying to wonder because the figures that Alan Shirkey gave me for bank stabilization were off the charts. I thought they were just off the charts.
Right. So if you look at, we own our own equipment and we pay our own people. We don't have, the overhead is low. We have a stockpile over at Merritt, maybe. They go get the material. They did a ton of the Irma repairs, so the costs were minimal, like in the thousands versus in the, larger numbers that you saw. But if you're going to do, and the erosion repairs that he's talking about is just maybe like 10 foot or 20 feet along the canal bank. It's not miles of canals. But, we have a lot of canals within the whole district that canal banks slough. You open coastal structures and, during high flow periods, and you can lose your whole canal bank from drawdown. And that's a problem. So we have a lot of canals in the system with those types of issues, and it's millions of dollars to repair.
Yeah, it was a lot of money.
It
Okay.
just real quickly, my other thought is my 2 cents would be some of that identifying how urgent the repair is and how quick we need to do it is what's going on near it. If you've got pedestrians on bikes and walking and are going to have a steep drop off if it gets worse, that may have a higher priority than something in a remote area where it doesn't present a danger to anybody. So another thing that probably goes into those evaluations.
Mr. Hill.
Juan, short answer. What's the useful life of the pump station motors?
For the pump station motors,
Yeah,
the ones that we have over at the.
yeah, the other ones, roughly.
20 years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else from Mr. Bethencourt? Any public comment, Aaron?
I have no public comment, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your presentation. We'll move ahead to the water conditions report.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. My name is Brad Jackson, Principal Engineer for the Big Cypress Basin. And I'm here to talk about the water conditions since our last board meeting, and I'll just kind of jump right into it here. So as I usually do, kind of start off here with our monthly summary for our year so far. And looking at 2021, it's only been a month since we met last, but looking so far, we're pretty close to average. We had a dry season, but the wet season's more than made up for that at this point. And we're sitting at about 90% of average for the year to date. Got about a 4% deficit, but the wet season so far is pretty much on average looking right now. Looking at our July rainfall, here we've got a map on the left that's the average rainfall by basin within the Big Cypress Basin. So a couple things to note here: the 2 winners of the basin are their northern natural areas, Corkscrew Swamp, and those areas got 11.5 or so inches of rain. The one to the right, here you can see these these darker reds. Those are 17 to 18 inches of rain in localized spots. So a couple definitely high totals there, and natural areas which could benefit from that. But as far as the urban areas, pretty much an average July for us, looking around a little bit more than average, 10 inches or so, but far cry from our high of 15 or 14.5 inches 20 years ago. So the highlight so far for August, at least is for weather, was Tropical Storm Fred. And I've got a little bit of information here. I'll walk through it. So starting here on the bottom left of the screen, this is when we were monitoring the storm, when it was approaching Hispaniola, which kind of acts as a blocker for us with all the mountains on it. And it helped it helped the storm not intensify too much. So it kind of kept it as a low grade tropical storm depression. As you could see at that point in time, we were looking at the Southwest Florida and Southern Florida in general was all in the cone of the storm. So we were looking at that. And then in the middle of the screen, we've got our rainfall forecast. You'd see big swaths of yellow and orange there. That's, 4 to 6 inches of rain proposed over the whole region, with areas higher, 6 to 10 inches was the forecast. To relate that back to some of the design storm information, 6 inches is about a 5-year storm in one day. So that might help give it a little bit of context. We did not get that much water here, but we did need to prepare for it. We didn't do a full storm drawdown, but we did do some lowerings to make sure what we could handle the 4 to 6 inches that was coming. As the track and it kind of wobbled around as it went over Cuba. You can see here as it was passing Florida, it was way out in the Gulf, but we did see still some rainfall from it. And we ended up getting about 2 to 3 inches on average, which isn't anything significant that we weren't able to handle. But that's definitely just not a bad thing. I'll take that any day. So I wanted to show some examples. We talk about how much we lower things down, but I thought we'd grab some pictures this time around and what a lowerings really look like. This isn't pre-storm drawdown operations. There's still a lot of room left. We could have done more if the forecasts were higher. But just kind of to walk through this real quick, the top left here, this is our I-75 two-weir. This is near Pine Ridge and I-75 near the hospital. So normally this time of year, you'd see 6 to 8 inches flowing over this concrete wall right here, and that's the weir that you would normally see. This area can be prone to some issues, so we wanted to lower those levels ahead of time to make some room for the rainfall. So we just wanted to document and show, this is what it looks like when we kind of do a lowering to give it some context to the board and to the public here. And then on Henderson Creek 1, it's a similar type of structure, sort of as the I-75 two-weir, and the fact that it has a fixed crest weir, you've got water flowing over that. But the takeaway there is we're releasing water here through these much bigger gates or the underflow gates to the right here. We do have more tools in our toolbox. We can get these lower if we need to. I want to keep iterating that. And then this is our new GG4 structure to the right here. This is about a mile north of Golden Gate Boulevard and 8th Street Northeast. You can see here, the gates are actually out of the water in this structure. So that doesn't happen too frequently. I mean, we were controlling this still with our downstream structures, but this area here is a little bit slower to respond. So we wanted to get levels under control there ahead of the storm, given how wet our July was with a little bit of above average rainfall. So that was Fred in a nutshell. As far as the rest of the month, it's been pretty typical wet season rainfall. We've had pretty much right on average, getting to about 8 inches, which is right where we should be for August. A couple of the winners for rainfall in the basin is right here in the heart of the system in Golden Gate, Maine. It's this kind of brownish color. It's 12 to 14 inches of rain here. And then again, up in the northeast portions in the slough natural areas. And then, so I talked a little bit about the whole calendar year, but really the water year, the impacts of last dry season have pretty much been erased. So I wanted to, show how much rain have we gotten since the rain season really started. And you can't get more average than what we have here. We've got 99% of average and only not even half an inch deficit from where we normally are for this time of year. So we're in good shape going into the peak of storm season. We don't have too much of a surplus and our system's not overly full anywhere. And we've got a lot of capacity left in the system for any storms that do come up. So moving on from here, how much water have we actually has left the system? Compare this with the amount of rain we received. These numbers are small, but if you compare them to how much we've normally released for this time of year, we're below average. So we're actually able to hold on to more water, promote groundwater recharge, and not over drain the system and find that balance. So just for example, GG1, you're at 60,000 acre feet we've released since May 1st. Normally this time of year, around 65 or 68,000 for right now. So we're lower than normal, which is just it helps show the operational flexibility that all the capital improvements have had. It lets us fine tune our system that much closer. Also of note here, the Picayune Strand PSRP here to the right. That's our second biggest one really, as far as it's a managed system. So there's been more water pumped through that system than through Henderson Creek 1 or Cocoa 1. Added together. So that's interesting to note. I mean, obviously the watersheds are bigger, but it does show that, we are getting, that's the restoration flows right there that you can see. To the right here, just an example of how much water you really can move through GG1. This isn't from this year, fortunately, but it is just a testament to how much water really can flow through that canal. when it's really full. So I mentioned, where the water levels have been. I want to talk about where they are in terms of historic. And this graph might be a little deceiving. There's a lot of blacks and greens and blues on here, which means we're higher than normal. But normal is a little deceptive just because we've done so many improvements to the capital, to the system. We're able to hold things higher and respond faster. So we don't have to send the field station out to make changes. We can do things a lot tighter and respond quicker. So that's why most of these are in the green and the black and showing in the higher percentile for the historic range. I'll move over here to Picayune Strand. You saw Steve Basin's presentation, and just to kind of mimic that, we've seen the monitoring wells inside Picayune Strand. The eastern half, we're seeing those levels higher than average for this time of year in the 75th to 90th percentile. And compare and contrast that with Miller area, the western half, which still has canals flowing through it, which makes sense. But that's just we can start to see the restoration happen right there. So I'll quickly walk through the canal system. These are just a couple of critical points in each watershed. The purple is GG1, the blue is GG4, and you've got the corresponding historical trends here on the right. And so where you can see the dips, those are our kind of pre-storm lowerings. If they were a pre-storm drawdown, they would be lower than that for sure. But we did lower them to the bottom of our operational range, which is that blue kind of band that we stick in. But you'll see kind of an overarching trend in these, which we're trying to run near the top of this blue line, where we have the quick responsive structures and we can respond quickly with the automated types of control. So moving north here, this is Cocohatchee. You'll see similar things. We're running here at near the top as we can, as water allows. And then we've got these drops here and we'll rebound right back up to the top because it's been so wet. And more than enough water to keep the system full this time of year. Our Picayune Canal, this is FU5, a northern structure. A similar story here. I mean, we're running near the top of the wet season line there. And then FU1 down here. It's interesting. It's been pretty wet in the southern part of Picayune Strand. That line's paralleling the 75th percentile. And it's kind of been doing that throughout the basin. We're seeing a lot of so that kind of gives you an idea of how wet are we historically. So we're a little wetter than normal down at Picayune number 1, a little bit more discharge out of the system. And that's just, because of the direct rainfall on it, not necessarily from the pump station operations or any changes there. So Henderson Creek, similar story here. You've got the small little dips for the storm, but really trying to hold as much water there as possible while maintaining flood control. I will note Henderson Creek 2, this one here at the very upper part of the system. It's very porous there, more so than other places, and we really don't operate that one very much. So we only open it in times of storm or ahead of time, and just because that water can draw down so quickly, we want to protect the wetlands that structure was built to protect. So move away from the basin operations a little bit over to the Picayune Strand operations. And, this is really the first time we've seen the Picayune pump station operating for any more than a few days, which I was talking about last presentation. So the kind of overarching trend here, the purple and the blue lines here, we're trying to follow and mimic the 75th, so the top of the green band. If you remember the FU1, it was right at that 75th percentile. So I'm trying to mimic what's been going on historically with the pump station operations. So that's been kind of the target. There are some ups and downs. It is a manned pump station. You can't do that perfectly, but that's the overarching trend. And then at the bottom here, there was a flight not too long ago, this week, I believe, that really shows the restoration in action. So this here is after about a month and a half of continuous pumping at Picayune Pump Station. All of these spreader, these concrete structures here see water flowing through them, and you can see the water sheet flowing all the way down to where the plug stops, and they'll continue that next year. So it's really cool to see that, especially from the air and seeing it in motion. So it's really nice to see. So that's a picture of Picayune Strand. Here's kind of our interpolation using our topography and all of our well sets. So I want to walk through this real quickly here. But the highlight here, crew, this is Court True area. You can see the yellows and the greens are where the water is above ground. And if it's dark red, you're 2 feet, or more below grade is where the water is. So you want to see in August that you would be above grade in your natural areas and your wetland areas. What's interesting last year, the one on the right, that was 1 year ago, we had lots of areas of dark red without water on it. We had similar rainfall patterns. So I don't necessarily have an explanation for that. That's just what the information showing here. It could just be the exact location of where the rain sat, some canal operations, but for the most part, that's just a result of rainfall. And then the thing I really want to highlight is Picayune Strand, the box here at the bottom. Last year, this time of year, you saw no greens or blues south of Picayune Pump Station, which is about where my cursor is, right under the S on the right. If you fast forward a year, then you've got this green blob here, and that represents that sheet flow that I showed on the last slide. So it's really cool to see that. You can see it here, you can see it in the pictures and in the model. It's all running together, which is awesome to see. And then, Steve Basin talked about the construction. The Southwest Protection Feature starts right over here where they've said it's been really wet. You can see all these green areas here. That might be why they're having some trouble there. So they have had a lot of rainfall down there. And so moving on to groundwater trends, as you would expect, groundwater trends are on the up this time of year. We're starting to reach our normal peak of those levels in late September, early October. But for the most part, everything's normal and in the median range for the period of record for all of these wells. So we're not seeing increased groundwater levels anywhere in August, which is a good thing. So looking further out in the future for September and then the first part of the dry season, we're seeing equal chances. That's what's predicted. Again, these are just climate models, so they don't necessarily have, they're not fine resolution. We can't count on them, but it gives you an overall trend on what we might be able to expect. What I'd like to note here, on January through March next year, we do have this below average rainfall possibility again, which we had this year. So as we make a transition in dry season, this is kind of an indicator of when we might be able to make the switch into dry season so we can start to conserve more water in our system and prolong the amount of time that we have it instead of losing it to tide. In the short term, it's probably going to be a wetter weekend. We've got a tropical, I think it's a depression now, came out this morning. It's no longer just a area of interest, but it's going to move northwest towards Louisiana. And then as it skirts by the peninsula Florida, we might have some rainfall over the weekend, but nothing like Fred or anything like that that we need to worry about. So, but as always, this time of year, we got our eyes on the tropics and are ready to make changes as need be. And off we go with hopefully no more storms this year. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brad. Do any board members have questions for Brad? No. Is there any public comment, Erin?
I have no public comment, Madam Chair.
Oh, thank you. Brad, thank you for an excellent report. And each time you give this report, you add something or clarify something that really sets it apart. So I really appreciate that. And the 5-year level storm event, it's 6 inches. That's a good thing. All right. Appreciate it. Okay, now brings us to our Basin Administrator's report. Lisa.
Thank you. Well, to echo Candy's sentiments, we are all very, very happy to bring this budget in for a final landing. And we're going to take about 2 weeks and bask in the success of this budget before we start putting your fiscal 23 preliminary budget together. So I wanted to let you all know that is next at your board meeting in October. If you have any questions or projects or things that you'd like to see coming up in 23, please give me a call so we can start talking about those. It's like we're going to be working on those in the next 2 weeks.
Wow, we don't finish with one and we start the next one. Imagine the staff, they just roll right over. It's great. Is that all you have for us today?
Yes.
Great. So our monthly financial report, Candy, it's your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. The monthly financial report in your packet today is through the month of June. So it's 75% of the year completed. And you've collected 101.9%, meaning you've collected additional revenues. And so you've collected 79,000 of additional revenues in your taxes, and that's because we budgeted a 4% discount. So we've received, some of that funding that we had projected to be a discount. We actually got the funding in, as well as we received the FEMA funding for Hurricane Irma, the 210,000. You do see your investment earnings are below, and I'm not concerned with it because you brought the additional FEMA funding in, as well as you've collected over your revenues. So it's not going to impact your year-end financials, meaning, tapping into fund balance that wasn't projected to be tapped into. So according to the expenditures, there is about $8 million of available funding. That looks rather large, but that is because there's about there is over 4.6 million of that's covering your 22 budget that we just discussed, where we're rebudgeting that authority to cover some of those expenses, which is your 2 million hurricane reserves, and then 2.6 million of funding that is being rebudgeted for the capital program as well as the regional projects. And then the remaining amount is about $2 million. And then that is to cover, staff time, et cetera, field operations for the remainder of the year. So there may be some additional balances, that do fall to fund balance, but everything looks good. So.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Candy from the board? No questions? Well, thank you, Candy. You're always a bearer of good news. So we always welcome your presence here at our meetings. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, this brings us to the last session for the general public comment. If there is any public comment, Erin?
I have no public comment, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll move on then to final board comment. Are there any board members that have any final comments? Well, I wanted to at least make a couple of comments to thank everyone who supported this meeting today and all of the staff who traveled from the East Coast over here to be a part of this meeting in person. So thank you for being here. I'd also like to thank the board. I mean, talk about engaging conversation and good questions today and really participating in our meeting. I just want to thank you for being here and for all the great work that you do. And we've got our very first opportunity as a board coming up this week for our groundbreaking for our Cypress 1 structure. And I think Brad brought out the fact that these capital projects are so important to giving us operational efficiencies to be able to manage the water even better. So it's very exciting that as a board, we'll have an event together, our very first one, which will be a groundbreaking. So I know that Erin's been busy coordinating that, and I hope everyone can attend, and I'm looking forward to it. And I hope we'll have good weather as well when we're out there. So thank you all for being such great participants and great board members here today. And with that, I'm going to announce that our next meeting is October 28th, and we're adjourned.